Alright everyone, I'll be sure to have a warning in the title and the description box because this video is about the transphobia coming out of the Young Turks. Just one tweet was going to be included in a video I'm already working on, but it's become that big of an issue, it needs its own video. So I consolidated as many of the transphobic comments said by hosts at TYT along with many channels that are explaining how they're wrong, debunking them, calling them out, and I wanted to include many people to highlight that there is a whole community of people that are calling this out and standing up against it, because this video is mainly for the people that would be feeling hurt and betrayed and disappointed. And also, to minimize the amount of links I'll have to include in the description box, I just added everyone's channel, so please go subscribe to all of them. Alright, now let's get started.
I very much disagree with Anna Kasparian and Jenk's take on gender affirming care and trans rights.
Dealing with not only the transphobic nonsense of the Republicans, but also whatever Jenk and Anna are on right now. It's just too much. And because at a certain point it becomes embarrassing, because then people think that I'm like endorsing their views, and I cannot. I will not. I refuse to lend any support to those views whatsoever.
You're a progressive because you have principles, and that means you don't pick a group and sacrifice them. You just don't do it.
The number one progressive network in the game, to have gathered so many supporters over all these years who support them because they were progressive, and now to see them even just a little bit. Yes, it does matter to see that when we have literal fascists talking about killing the LGBTQIA community, publicly executing them, that the concern for us as broadcasters, as activists, as people who have platforms, influence, whatever you want to call us, the concern should be that, full stop.
Where it all started. Anna Kasparian, producer and host of the Young Turks, TYT, the largest progressive news network in the world, tweeted this out. I'm a woman. Please don't ever refer to me as a person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates. How do people not realize how degrading this is? You can support the transgender community without doing this shit. Okay. Where is this coming from?
Tweeting out something like that, in my estimation, is the tweet itself, the act and the tweet in this context, right, is an anti-trans act. I just think it is.
Yeah. The 40 other content creators who are all sounding off, being like, this ain't it. Why are you doing this? Why? Why are you not listening to any of us?
Yeah, I'll be real with you. Seeing people I used to look up to make these outwardly transphobic remarks and double down on them really made me upset. Seeing them continue to do it and double down and then attack people that I know they supposedly like and work with, like David Doyle and the Serfs, and people who I used to work with who also looked up with them and treated us like mentors, like Emma Vigland. That definitely kind of set me off. But ultimately, my opinion is that Jenk and Anna know who they are. They know what influence they have. They brag about it all the time. It allows them to live the lives they have. They've earned it. They've done a lot of great things with that. Cool. But I don't really care what argument they're trying to make if these people are using your arguments to their advantage. I'm going to go into the picture here just to like see this, but like Candace Owens is able to retweet Anna Kasparian and go, good for you, and J.K. Rowling and Riley Gaines. Matt Walsh is able to go, you've repeatedly called me a transphobe in the past. Are you starting to see the label as nonsense, and are you starting to appeal to common sense? Stephen A. Miller saying Anna Kasparian to the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro retweeting an attack of Anna against Olai. Like, if you are in this position where right-wingers, who everyone involved in this conversation, including them, knows are going to act in bad faith, and they are able to use your message as a prominent person to move their bad faith genocidal message along, you fucked up.
Seemed like Anna had unwittingly kind of like handed the right this huge gift for no apparent reason, and I felt like this wasn't her intention, and there was this disconnect, and I wanted to figure out where this was coming from, right? And explained to her why a lot of people found that troubling. So I reached out to Anna privately because I felt like if she heard me out and, you know, tuned out all of the noise on Twitter, she would understand where myself and most leftists are coming from. And I felt like I kind of got her to see my point because I shared a video that she did where she defended inclusionary language just like 8 months ago when Professor Kyara Bridges was talking to Josh Hawley, and he was, you know, lambasting her for using people with the capacity for pregnancy in lieu of women.
They know there's a difference between gender and sex. They know that it is very possible for someone to be born a biological male or a biological female, but in terms of gender, identify differently as a male or non-binary, but they still have the biological capacity, the physical capacity to get pregnant. So that's why the language, the rhetoric is inclusive to include those people. It is not a big deal. But they make it a big deal. They manufacture it into a big deal.
And, you know, she even referenced that video that I shared with her on the show that day when this happened.
But I understand the importance of inclusive language. I just don't like to be boiled down to a body part. So Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report reminded me of a video we did a few years ago where we were defending someone who used the phrase people with the capacity for pregnancy in the context of the abortion debate, I believe it was. I'm totally fine with that. I think that's totally fine. If that's what they want to use in a medical setting, great. But for me, my personal preference is I don't like to be referred to, even in the context of an abortion debate, as a person with a uterus. Person with the capacity for pregnancy, that's great. That's all I'm saying. I think my track record on transgender issues is pretty clear, and I hope you understand that I have no disdain or hatred for the transgender community whatsoever. That's all.
And look, I agree that...
All right, first of all, I want to make it clear that this is now her record in regards to this topic. Secondly, which isn't a very important point, I added the date just to show that it was 8 months apart and not years, like what Anna said. And I find it interesting how she mentioned that clip, like Mike sent it to her to say, hey, what about a person with the capability of getting pregnant? Are you all right with that term? When he really sent it to say, look, you stated that you understood why it's used and how it's not a big deal. Why have you changed your stance on this? But she's acting like it was a particular term that was being suggested to her, when really, what is the difference between person with uterus and person with the capability of getting pregnant? Especially considering this all kicked off because of birthing person. And now finally, some important context I wanted to add. I wanted to know what made her bring it up on her show. So let's go have a look at that.
C. Zerkley wrote in, I love TYT, but I'm kind of tired of getting the vibe from Anna, and even Cenk at times, that my plight as a trans man who could get preggers if raped offends her because she feels like birthing persons is offensive.
So let me just address something, okay? For me, as a woman who has experienced endless debates, like our bodies are so politicized. And I hate feeling from the right wing my entire life that our bodies are just meant for producing children. So the phrase person with a uterus, for me, is triggering. But I understand the importance of inclusive language. I just don't like to be boiled down to a body part. So Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report reminded me of a video we did a few years ago.
Yep, so it was brought up by a member of the audience who is a trans man who wanted to express how they feel like TYT doesn't give a shit about them. And Anna then responded with, yep, only thing that matters to me is me. And actually responded to a trans person by saying, oh, my body's been so politicized. Fucking what? You're saying that to a trans person? Like, they sent a message talking about if they were raped. And Anna fucking went on about how inclusive language triggers her. I found this so fucking disgusting. This really made me so fucking mad. And now we're gonna move on to some tweets by TYT hosts and some conversations had back and forth. That part's important. Now I must stress, this is very important. Ole was minding her own business, tweeted out a video where she was talking about haters in general, and then she received this reply from Anna. Do you mean people who demand people cook their friends, those kinds of haters? And just note how many more likes the question mark got. I like that. And then Anna replied to the question mark with this video.
And you should be able to mention those without like having to classify it as, but you shouldn't get mad at her for this because of her history. No, I mean, no one's mad at her for her history.
I think it makes sense if you want her to change her mind and to understand what she did wrong. Because if without that context, like, again, that's why it's important if you know her that you do include that context, because she has to understand these disagreements are coming from an honest place, and we're not just doing it for clicks, right? Like that's so.
No, of course, but that's not the same. That's not the same, though. That's not the same.
I have to say it. Oh my God, I have to say it. I like Anna, but I feel a little bit like this is the coddle the white lady hour. And you know why? And you know why I thought this even earlier, because before this, the Majority Report put out a thing too, and everybody else, and I was like, boy, everybody sure feels the need to trip over their fucking feet to come out to defend her for getting cooked when all of the people get cooked all the time. I have yet to watch a video of anybody defending me from getting fucking cooked. I've never seen it. I've never seen everybody come out. She has a lot of fucking bad takes, and then she gets cooked because she comes out unprovoked. She asks to be cooked. She got up today and she said, Twitter, cook me.
Right. Listen,
She has yet to delete the tweet. I want to make it clear. She has yet to delete the fucking tweet.
She hasn't deleted it?
You know why? Because at the end of the day, she took a 106,000 like tweet. She didn't even get ratioed. She didn't even get ratioed. She'll be all right. She didn't.
So Ole quote tweeted that with, "You made transphobic statements and we spent an hour of the show defending you from allegations of being a TERF, rather than addressing the substantive problems with your comment. I said I felt like they were coddling you. I stand by that. If you think that makes me a hater, knock yourself out." Anna wasn't finished, so she quote tweeted that with, "LOL. The meltdowns over wanting to be referred to as a woman rather than a birthing person is pretty wild. I'll never apologize for that, especially as a biological woman who has had a fucking lifetime of being told I'm less than. I'm a woman, no apologies."
Now, I'm giving you all this extra context in regards to Twitter because I reckon Sandy identified it. Ole has been screaming about it, and I want to make it very clear for some people that still don't quite get it, that Anna was out to do this. Unprovoked, starting stuff, looking for the right tweet to retweet, to say, oh, look at people attacking me. Oh, look at these unreasonable leftists. It was even obvious in the video that Anna posted. Everyone was still coddling her, acting like she doesn't know what she's doing, that she just needs to be explained that she's doing something wrong and she'll see the error of her ways. And it was good to see Ole share my frustration of people defending someone who is making these decisions. And that's why she went after Ole, because she knew that that was her best chance of getting a response with the words in it, like TERF and transphobic, to then retweet to get attention from it. And so people just looking from the outside in, they don't know that Anna had to go and reply to a tweet by Ole to even get that sort of response. Like, she had to provoke it so much to get a tweet that she found suitable to act like she's being attacked. And look, I'm just here to call it like it is, and that's just really bratty, immature behaviour with detrimental consequences. Now let's go through some more tweets and responses.
Literally part of TYT's network tried to get Cenk to understand that inclusive language isn't actually that unpopular and it's necessary, but Cenk responded condescendingly, claiming that she's hurting her own cause by insisting on this type of language. And this was probably the worst response that I saw. And it came when Cenk responded to Emma, who went out of her way to be gracious, only to be met with this smug response. Quote, "Good news, we are on the right side, mission accomplished. Now let me talk to you in a patronizing way about all of your opinions I need to correct."
Then going after Emma. Isn't your point contradictory? If that number is correct, that means that any aversion to inclusive language is marginal compared to policy sets. Democrats have been doing well electorally, and well, nobody is making voting decisions based on clumsy activist medical language. Yes.
Cenk, the transphobe thing isn't an insult, it's just a fact. And lied about our private conversation. Wow, what a level-headed person that I could learn from and grow by talking to. Great idea. And I replied, you could learn from treating former employees with a bit of respect. You exploit their labor for profit and your employees literally built your company. You should remember that. Your only visible trans employee quitting should be a moment where you reflect and not continue to be stubborn.
All right, and the last tweet I want to point out was just a random one I stumbled across, and I have to mention it because someone actually called this out long before many other people did, back in April of 2022. And the tweet's at both the hosts and says, "Missed the mark on the term birthing person the same way transphobes intentionally misgendered trans people, because I don't like it. Not a good look, TYT live." And now finally on the topic of Twitter, I gotta talk about what made this so serious to me, why I'm so disturbed by what Anna is doing, because to be retweeted and praised and agreed with by people that are in manifestos of mass shooters and people that have incited bomb threats to children's hospitals, it is truly disgusting to have those sort of people agree with you. And this was a tweet that was going to be used in my original video to then segue into what Anna's been saying until I decide to make this entire video. And so I'll use this opportunity to recommend everyone watch the video that just came out by Sean about this character. Highly recommend. And now I'm going to play you just one more clip from the Humanist Report.
Cenk punched left and he called out Lance from the Serfs, who, again, was nothing but kind.
Here, I'll name a name. Lance from the Serfs. He's on here all the time on the power panel, right? And he comes out and does this video about how he's so correct and, oh yeah, the Young Terfs, correct? No, Lance, you're not goddamn correct. Nobody elected you. The polling shows no one agrees with you. Your 12 buddies online, I don't care, okay? And say, oh yeah, I'm 100%, he's 99.95% correct. Oh, I'm gonna correct him. No. So don't, look, you wanna say, hey, I don't agree with you? God bless. You wanna say, Cenk, you shouldn't say anything back because you're being rude? Come on, brother or sister, I don't know what
to be honest, I just don't really care to like collaborate with any other leftist ever again at this point.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at, because they come on the show, they build a name for themselves, and then they build a bigger name for themselves, trashing us as if they don't know who we are, as if they haven't worked with us, they don't know what our actual political values are. So I don't, Jake, I never want to talk about them again. I never want to address them again. It's a waste of time. There's important stuff going on in the country. Our personal drama with a bunch of leftists on Twitter doesn't matter.
Yep, there are more important things to be talking about. And so this leads us to our next topic of discussion, schools.
Values that Donald Trump shares with you then?
Parents in control of their children, you know, being able to make choices for your family. America's been assaulted. Open borders, you know all the issues. We all know the issues.
He has our values, does he? What's your values? I mean, you don't mean family values. He's raw dogging porn stars and he's says terrible things, does terrible things. You don't mean family values. So what values are you talking about? Oh, you know, he believes in putting parents in charge of children. That means I don't like gay people. I'm sorry, that's what it means.
That means he wants to be able to make a decision or help.
A decision about what?
He doesn't want schools making decisions for
about
his kids.
About gay people.
It's
and racism, right? He doesn't want racism taught. Those are the two issues, Anna. Those are the two issues in the schools.
Those are not the two issues, okay? One of the issues that you're totally downplaying right now, not even mentioning, is that some school districts want to, let's say a student comes out and identifies as transgender, school districts want to support that student and, you know, help him or her through that transition without ever having to notify the parents. I think there are issues there. Okay, and I do not begrudge parents for being concerned about that.
Anna, I agree with you. But you're finding a sliver of an issue. That guy's not talking, he doesn't even know that. And when you ask him about the issues, they always go to, I don't like Latinos, I mean immigrants. I don't like gay people, I mean, I want parental control in schools. So that's the reality, you can see it all over the tapes.
That is your interpretation. None of that was actually said. It is what you have taken out of his statements there.
You're right.
Yeah.
See, I find that clip interesting because you can see Anna bend over backwards to be overly charitable towards the MAGA chud, but for some reason, she can't extend that same level of charitability towards trans people and their allies who reached out in good faith to explain to her why her rhetoric has been harmful as of late. See, when it comes to MAGA chuds, we've got to try to interpret what they're saying in the most charitable way imaginable, but when it comes to allies of trans people and trans people, well, they're attacking me. Haven't you seen my record? It's just ridiculous. But that's not why I wanted to play the video. So when they're speculating about what this conservative means by parents in control of their children, Anna ascribes good intentions to him by suggesting that he's probably talking about school districts who support and help students through their transitions, right, without ever notifying parents. Now, she says that there's an issue with that. Now, let me be very clear. First and foremost, teachers cannot consent to gender-affirming care on behalf of parents. Parents have to give consent in order for minors to receive gender-affirming care. Second of all, protecting a child's identity is crucial because there are many LGBTQ plus kids who become homeless after getting rejected by unsupportive parents. So some school districts purposefully do not out kids to parents because of that very reason. They could literally endanger their lives.
I'll give you some perspective if you have an open heart. So when I was younger and I was coming out as trans at school, I was indeed hiding it from my family. But do you know why that is? Because 40% of homeless youth are LGBT. And for me at the time, my biggest fear was that I would come out to my family and they would kick me out. I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't know how to survive on the streets. So you know what I did? I hid from my family that I was transgender until I was in a position where I could support myself. That decision was survival for me. I was raised in a very Christian, very conservative home, and I knew that if I told my father who I was, I would be removed from the home. And I'm very happy that I did things that way. And I'm so thankful that I had teachers who were supportive.
Now, I'm sure that extra information is all people need to truly understand why what Anna was pushing is absolute bullshit. And so now we'll move on to the next topic of sports. And so we're going to start with the Young Turks discussing Donald Trump mocking transgender athletes, in particular a transgender weightlifter.
Right, we don't know exactly what he is referring to, but there are some prominent cases that have led to backlash that he could be talking about, so let's give you the examples.
Stop right there. It is not your job to identify examples for Trump to validate his anti-trans argument. It is your job to explain to your audience how these anecdotes that you can find should not be used to justify discrimination. It is your job to educate your audience about how insignificant this issue is. There are approximately just 150 trans athletes in total in the United States, 100 at the college level and 50 about at the K through 12 level. I mean, in 2021, Associated Press, they reached out to dozens of GOP lawmakers who wrote legislation banning trans girls from high school sports, and they asked for examples of trans athletes being disruptive, and none of them could present any examples.
The hormone blockers do lower the testosterone, they do even things out a lot, right? But the men still have other physical advantages, like we maintain mass much better. And to give you a sense of how unfair this is, that where she won in Canada with 275-pound bench press, I bench press 275, okay? And that's not a big deal for a guy.
This is so ridiculous. This is literally so ridiculous. Okay, think about this. He's like, oh, this trans woman won a competition where she broke a record bench pressing 275 pounds. And clearly, that's unfair. Because I, a cisgender man, can easily bench press 275 pounds. Therefore, there must be an advantage. And it's like, my guy, she literally broke a record. Like, what are you talking about? She clearly wasn't having like an incredibly easy time. You're stumbling so close to the point. Like, Cenk is literally incapable in this moment of separating trans women from cisgender men in his own brain right here.
People born male have different physical capabilities on average compared to women. We're talking about weightlifting here. Are we really going to pretend like there isn't an advantage when it comes to individuals who are born male?
And I suppose I've got to point this out for people like Anna. When you're born, regardless of if it's male or female, you're a baby. There is very little difference between most babies. You know when the difference really starts to kick in? Puberty, because of hormones. But okay, there are plenty of trans people for plenty of reasons that didn't get a chance to transition till after puberty. And you're all valid, by the way. Alright, so what sport were they talking about again? Oh, Yep, you're talking about weightlifting, but you're also talking about weightlifting in Canada, because you see, this is an issue that impacts that fewer people. You need examples from other countries, because the ones you have in America don't really make your point that well, do they? Like that swimmer Leah Thomas, because the only reason I know her name is because some transphobe tied with her for 5th place. And to wrap up the part about sports, I thought I would supply an example of a transgender athlete actually being disruptive, and this happening in America, Texas to be exact. Now, this transgender athlete won 2 years in a row. Very unfair for the cisgender girls that had to compete against this transgender athlete. Oh, and by the way, it was wrestling. And I'm being serious when I say I'm certain that the testosterone that the trans athlete has absolutely made it not fair for the cisgender girls that they had to wrestle. See, what a incredible example. You see, because back in 2017 and 18, transgender wrestler Mac won both years because he was made to wrestle against girls and wasn't allowed to wrestle other boys.
It's not fair for that individual that wants to transition and wrestle boys, and it's not fair for the female wrestlers for this unfair advantage.
Basically follows this up by blaming trans athletes and anybody who dares to just support trans people existing for all of the transphobic legislation that is passing across the country and for Republicans winning.
That is incredibly selfish of activists who are betraying their own community. Because when you say I don't care about elections, who cares about the Democrats? That isn't the point. The Republicans introduced over 600 bills against the LGBTQ community. That's because of elections. And over 70 of them have already passed. When you say I don't care about winning and I don't care about elections, what you're saying is I'm super selfish leftist activist and I'd like to build my cloud. But meanwhile, I'm willing to throw trans people and the entire LGBTQ community under the bus, knowing that these bills are gonna pass because we're laser focused on a losing issue.
And he's like, oh, if Republicans win because the trans people want to play sports, it'll be all your fault. And like, how disgusting is that actually? You are genuinely gonna blame people whose existence is like actively being criminalized by Republicans for their own oppression? Give me a break.
For once in your life, think strategically about what that means. That means that you're going to continue pushing the Democratic Party to unequivocally support everything that the trans activists want, even if it's unpopular among the electorate. That means they're not getting reelected. That means they're going to lose to Republicans. Republican lawmakers who are passing draconian, disgusting legislation in various states right now as we speak against the transgender community. So how does that make you win exactly?
TYT here is simply using their platform to how it comes off to me. Turn their audience, which is made up of largely, I believe, people that are progressive, Bernie supporters, people that are liberals, turn their audience on left-wing activists, on trans activists. They're using their platform to make their audience hate trans activists, because you're not changing the activist mind. I mean, you realize that, right? They're not changing their strategy based on Cenk Uygur. So all you're doing with this platform is trying to throw hate at people who have no power at all. Again, looking at the polling here, which should not dictate the entirety of what we fight for, but if that's their focus. This is right before the midterms. GOP listens from Bloomberg. GOP looks to fire up base with attacks on transgender rights. This was their main focus in the midterms, attacking transgender people. How did they do? Republicans doubled down on anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric in the midterms. It wasn't a winning platform. This year saw an underwhelming showing for anti-LGBTQ candidates and historic wins for LGBTQ nominees. So a little more specifics here. And yes, it also addresses the trans sports part as well. So according to exit polling from LGBTQ plus advocacy organization, the Human Rights Campaign, and data analytics firm Catalyst, voters ranked LGBTQ plus issues as low on their list of priorities for 2022. More than half, 52%, chose inflation, and 29% picked abortion. transgender healthcare and participation in sports came in last on the list of issues with just 5%. So the one data set that we have where it is very clear the focus from the right was on hatred of transgender people, they lost historically. What world, what world do you have to live in to think that, again, if all you cared about was polling, not the actual lives of trans people, if that's all you cared about was the polling, what world are you living in where trans activists are the ones losing elections for Democrats? What world is this? Because not this world.
Just a quick reminder to subscribe to all the channels I have linked below.
This is amazing. I'm just going to play this.
I'm wondering if you think that DeSantis's, very public war on woke distracts from the message that you like about him.
A little bit, I do.
He did sign a law that restricts transgender care for adults as well as kids.
I have greater concerns about the 6-week abortion ban.
Tell me about that.
I think if he made it clear that he's a states' rights person and that he's not looking to kind of pass a national law in this regard, I would be less concerned.
This DeSantis voter is completely unfazed. She doesn't care about trans issues at all, either way.
The fact that TYT discussed the same CNN clip, they started the clip just after the woman being interviewed, ignored the question about transgender people and changed the subject. The TYT video starts just as the woman starts talking about abortion. Interesting. And now moving on to Bonus Hole.
Why Bonus Hole is going viral on Twitter and what that means? I don't think so. Wait, what? Yes, it is a song, Jesus Christ. Wait, what? I don't make things up, but my point is that this stuff turns people off. It's not really controversial. The bonus hole? What is happening here? What? No way.
I think that protecting, marginalized communities, protecting the transgender community is important. However, when you move out of or move far away from making sure that they are not denied housing, making sure that they're not denied healthcare, when you move into like these more fringe areas of there was a story out of the UK this week.
What fringe areas do you mean? You mean outside of legal and into social recognition and putting away social bigotry, removing institutional bigotry, and then moving on to more esoteric things like stopping social bigotry? Is that what you mean?
There was a story out of the UK this week, blows my mind. There was an LGBTQ group in the UK who suggested that instead of referring to vaginas as vaginas because it might be offensive to transgender men, one of the potential replacements or substitutes could be bonus hole.
She said, I don't make things up, and my point is that stuff turns people off. It's not really controversial. And she links to an article that is talking about the bonus hole term that she is talking about. Here is the article right here. Why bonus hole is going viral on Twitter and what the term means. And if all you have to do is scroll to the bottom of the article, and I don't know if she read the entire article. I really don't think she did. I don't know what she heard about this. But this is the end of the article here. To be clear, because apparently this has to be spelled out. No one, literally no one, is saying that the word bonus hole is mandatory for anyone to use, be they cis, trans, or non-binary. It's simply a suggestion presented for trans men and non-binary people, and presumably anyone who prefers it can use. Folks, this is not hard to grasp. Offering alternative terms to people who are seeking medical treatment is an easy way to be respectful of the gender dysphoria some trans men and non-binary folks may be experiencing. Whether or not you use bonus hole or not should be a personal choice. Sadly, some online just can't or won't understand nuance, and for the TERFs who see this as some sort of vernacular takeover, in the words of Taylor Swift, you need to calm down. Again, I don't know why Anna fucking linked that article, because at the very bottom of the article, again, this is the end of the article here. It literally, it doesn't, my fucking problem with this is, Anna, why the fuck does it matter? It's not gonna negatively impact your fucking life in any goddamn way.
And I hope people can see that Anna just hates inclusive language. It's not like there's one particular term that she really doesn't like, it's just all of it. Alright, and now I hope you're ready for one of the most insane chapters of this video.
This is the hill she's dying on. This is what listening to Jesse Signal does to your brain. She literally admitted to subscribing to his Substack and podcast. Oh no.
Yeah, Anna's been listening to Jesse Singal and subscribing to his Substack for over a fucking year. She's gone. Like, I'm sorry.
Because she has defended anti-trans propagandist Jesse Singal, saying Jesse Singal is not a transphobe at all. They just want to suppress anything that questions the safety of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors. It's pretty disgusting to say the least, and I'm glad that their efforts to destroy his career hasn't worked. Now, it's evident that she's been watching a lot of right-wing media because cross-sex hormones is a dog whistle that the right uses, right? It's words that they use because it primes you to think about HRT in a more negative way.
Icing on the cake here is this tweet where Anna Kasparian has decided to unilaterally declare Jesse Singal to not be a transphobe, despite, and this is what's really wild, Jesse Singal literally talking to whistleblowers at a medical facility that appear to have made some significant HIPAA violations about their patients in sharing the information that they did with Jesse Singal.
And how complicated and complex a lot of these issues are. You know, one of the things that Jesse Singal says all the time that I love, and he says it repeatedly, is it's complicated, because it is. Like, all of these issues are way more complicated than the way they're being portrayed in partisan media. And so what...
Sure, but Jesse Singal is intentionally pushing a narrative that is incredibly transphobic. That's why people have been pointing out, hey, if you're going to have an article, especially an article in a prominent magazine, if it's going to be a big event, and you give a microphone almost exclusively to either detransitioners or people who are activists against the trans community, when this is a situation in which if you did journalistic integrity and you know what you're supposed to do, not malpractice, you would investigate it. You would look into it. You would find out very quickly that every major medical association in the United States agrees on gender affirming care.
Singal is a good faith, I think, critical thinker. I'm subscribed to Blocked and Reported. I have listened to endless podcast episodes from Blocked and Reported. I haven't seen anything from Jesse Singal that communicates to me that he is a transphobe, that he is a bad person. He did straight news reporting on basically what, you know, some of the risks could be when it comes to transitioning literal kids with puberty blockers and then cross-sex hormones. And through his reporting, which I'm very sad to say I didn't really come across until this year.
Anna seems to really be a fan of this Jesse guy, this so-called journalist. Alright, now I'm going to explain why this guy and what he writes causes real-life damage, and also how he is extremely embarrassing. And I don't know why anyone would ever want to be associated with him. And the best part is, it's going to be simple for me, because all I really have to do is show you his work, show you some of his tweets. Let's get into this. We'll start with what Benny mentioned about the whistleblower and the HIPAA violations, because oh my goodness, my friends, it gets so much more ridiculous. New from me, gender clinic whistleblower Jamie Reed has provided a detailed account of her most controversial claim, including names of those involved. Next tweet in his thread. It could certainly be the case that Reed is not telling the truth, but she provided me with a full blow-by-blow details of the incident that sparked the helicopter child reference in her affidavit, and it lines up with what has happened elsewhere. This is from the 11th of March this year. I wonder if Anna was following along for this one. Yeah, fuck the third one. But the fourth tweet in his thread. Here, for the first time, is what Jamie Reed was referencing when she mentioned a kid identifying as a helicopter in her affidavit. And now I just have to read one line from the screenshot that he provided with this tweet. This is amazing. The patient was quoted in the letter as saying they identify as a communist attack helicopter, human female, maybe non-binary. Finished the letter by saying the young person was ready for hormones. Very serious person. Groundbreaking reporting right here. I bet Anna followed this one along very closely. But now let's go back to before Anna was a fan, a couple years ago, 2018. Alright, here's this article published by The Daily Dot titled Journalist Jesse Signal says he goofed on interpreting trans study. and quickly go through it to give you a rough idea. He misinterpreted data from a study that was key to a feature story he wrote in 2016. Pretty much the study had 127 patients and 80 of them didn't come back to the clinic, so they just said they're all cisgender now. And like it says, but that isn't exactly true, and it says it led him to correct the error, and this article had his tweet with his blog post about it linked to it, but I wonder if the author at the Daily Dot knows that then the next day this dude fucking tweeted it again, but said, I goofed in my coverage of the largest published childhood gender dysphoria desistance study. The study offers stronger evidence for genuine desistance than I initially thought. But yeah, when they were writing this article, they also reached out to him for his statement, and he wrote one, but it was too long to include, and they just linked it. And I had to share this because I reckon it's a great example of what this guy and people like him are pushing. And it's a perfect example of how he tries to give himself plausible deniability. So, my too long statement for the Daily Dot's article about my desistance blog post. There's a scientific consensus that some children with gender dysphoria desist. That is, their gender dysphoria goes away and they come to eventually identify with the gender corresponding to their sex assigned at birth. As I wrote in my blog post, WPATH and the American Psychological Association and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Endocrine Society all recognize that desistance occurs, and I have never spoken with a clinician who believes it to be a full stop myth. That said, there has been some incisive critiques of the limited literature on this subject written by trans and cis observers alike, and I am sympathetic to the idea that the most commonly disseminated desistance figure of about 80% might be an overestimate. When it comes to the question of what percentage of truly gender dysphoric as opposed to merely gender non-conforming kids come to identify as cisgender in the long run, but having carefully evaluated and re-evaluated these critiques, I don't think fully accounting for them is likely to bring the desistance rate anywhere near zero. And my skepticism that desistance is a myth or is something only relevant for the purposes of transphobic arguments, bolstered by my conversations with gender-affirming clinicians who have acknowledged that desistance occurs and who believe that children's gender identity development is often far more complicated than lay people realize. Alright, and then the second paragraph, and then we'll discuss. On the other hand, I empathize with the fears I often encounter about this concept being used for a bad end, especially given the psychological and psychiatric establishment's long histories of harming and denying identities of trans people, youth, and adults alike. Anyone who uses the concept of desistance as justification to mistreat transgender and or gender non-conforming children or adolescents by forcing them to act in a more cisgender, gender-conforming manner is not only inflicting potentially serious, potentially illegal psychological harm on the child in question, but is also ignoring the full nuance of the science, particularly the Steensma study I wrote about, which noted that the more intensely dysphoric a given child felt, the more likely they were to identify as trans in the long run. We simply don't have reliable information on the question of who desists and why, and every TGNC child deserves the opportunity to explore the complex contours of gender identity and expression in a safe, nurturing environment where they won't be judged or punished or stigmatized for being who they are. I can't emphasize this enough, nor can I emphasize how badly one would have to misunderstand the desistance literature and its limitations to use this concept to excuse the awful, reprobated practices of the past. Alright, that's all important for you to remember later on for a point I'm going to make. And you see, this whole second paragraph is just to say nice, supportive sounding things to definitely not look like he's got any sort of bad intention. And back to the first paragraph, I just want to quickly say how ridiculous it is. I reckon he just makes everything long to just TLDR, you know? But on the face of it, he's like dressing up to say that the only options are it's a myth, 0, absolutely none, 0%, or this figure here of, which might be an overestimate, but 80%? But yeah, when I read this 80%, it made me remember a video I've watched before from a channel called Swolesome, which will be below, and you got to subscribe to all of them. And he's talking about some of the information and its sources that's being used to push anti-trans bills in different states. I think this one in particular was Missouri, and it's very important. Pay attention.
Two major red flags are the inclusion of Davida Singh's 2021 paper in addition to Lisa Lippman's textbook example of selection bias. For those not in the know, Lippman's work is the origin of the phrase rapid onset gender dysphoria, and largely the inspiration for Abigail Schreier's book Irreversible Damage. Both of these works have received massive criticism for being unscientific, pathologizing, and generally just harmful. Lippman's work failed to survive peer review, not because it was critical of trans identities, as many people would have you believe, but because the methodology was quite frankly atrocious. There were many problems with it, but one of the more obvious ones is that the structure was self-report from parents of transgender children specifically recruited through anti-transgender websites. Lippman's work and Schreier's book have both been debunked countless times over. The Singh study, meanwhile, is frequently referenced by anti-trans hate groups and legislators. The specific statement that they love to throw around is that over 85% of youth experiencing gender dysphoria desist in that experience. I say 85%, but I have heard them say 80%, I have heard 85, I have heard 88, and I've even heard 90. Apparently nobody has actually read this study and can get the number correct. Now, my guess, based on this and many other things, is that many of these people have not actually read this study, but even those who have don't seem to understand, or at least are not really willing to acknowledge that the way desist was defined in this particular work was dubious at best. Laypersons are led to believe that participants were recorded as desisting if they stopped experiencing gender incongruence. What actually happened was that participants were recorded as desisting if they stopped participating in the study, responding to it for whatever reason, or made a mistake on their paperwork. It's not that they no longer identified as trans, they were just no longer in the study or recorded correctly. Examples of people marked as desisters include those who switched to another healthcare provider, whose family moved from the location of the clinic and were no longer able to attend, participants who withdrew from the study because they were uncomfortable with the behavior of the clinicians/researchers, participants who underwent a legal name change, which is extremely common for transgender people, and participants who just no longer responded to follow-ups, which is extremely common in population research in general. Singh's study was immediately criticized upon its release and should have been withdrawn for its embarrassingly irresponsible methods. The Missouri rule references Singh's work directly, and at least 2 other sources that it uses cite Singh's work. Further relevant information is that Singh was a student of infamous conversion therapist Kenneth Zucker, who lost his practice here in Canada for violations of ethics that harmed countless people. One such example is a study that rated the physical attractiveness of boys with gender identity disorder. I swear I'm not making this up. That is literally the title of the paper. More on Zucker himself another day. What you need to understand for this discussion is that Singh was trained by this monster, and so it's very, very likely that a great many of the people who left her study or desisted did so because of anti-trans attitudes. A properly conducted longitudinal study published about a year later by the American Academy of Pediatrics found that only about 2.5% of youth seeking trans care eventually realized they were cis. 94% persisted in their binary trans identity, 3.5% identified as non-binary, and 1.3% explored other possibilities and eventually returned to their binary trans identity.
Alright, to highlight what we've learnt, here is the list of people whose work is very dangerous and damaging to trans people, starting with Anna's favourite and then some of the names we've just learnt about. And I want you to take note of all of these for the next thing I need to show you.
Alabama lawmakers have now passed one on Thursday that will criminalize gender-affirming health care for transgender youth with a threat of 10 years in prison for medical providers.
Okay, so the law was passed in April of 2022, and then when it was challenged, thankfully the judge put a block on the law so trans kids in Alabama could still get the care that they needed. And now I want to show you this brief, which is supposedly for the judge to give them more information to help them decide the case. Alright, now this is from the Ethics and Public Policy Center. They state that they have a strong interest in ensuring the proper interpretation and application of rights guaranteed by the Constitution, promoting the Judeo-Christian vision of the human person. Now, this is what this document pretty much says. There is no national or international medical consensus regarding an authoritative standard of care for gender dysphoria or transitioning treatment. There is no consensus within the medical professional historically. There is a lack of evidence supporting transitioning treatments for minors. These society guidelines are not the standard for care. There is a suppression of evidence-based research and discourse. The lack of medical consensus is reflected internationally. The federal government has recognized the lack of medical consensus. State action reflects the lack of medical consensus. Transitioning treatments can lead to serious harm, especially in minors. That's what they're trying to say, right? And now you already know some of the names that we're going to see in the table of authorities, so let's have a look and go through them. Yep, there they are, alphabetical order. So it appears that when Republicans are trying to justify their anti-trans laws and their bans on transgender healthcare, we're gonna see the same reoccurring names. Alright, and as for Alabama, I believe that the judge has managed to buy some more time and drag this out until 2024. And now let me make it clear, Alabama was just one of many examples I could find when I started looking into things related to this claim right here.
I haven't seen anything from Jesse Singal that communicates to me that he is a transphobe, that he is a bad person.
It's like, no shit, Anna, you don't fucking say. He never announced on his own podcast that most of his work is used to help push anti-trans laws, and so it has to be said. It has to be fucking said. How fucking dare you? How fucking dare you berate your audience and berate people that actually care about trans people? How dare you chastise them while subscribing to someone whose work is so damaging to trans people? Anna says this guy is a good faith, clear thinker when his work is being used by Judeo-Christian groups to help push absolute bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Oh yeah, let's go have a look at the article by Jesse that was referenced in that brief. Shall we? Let's go have a look. It was this one, back from 2016. How the fight over transgender kids got a leading sex researcher fired. Now just to give you a bit of an idea, here's some parts of the article. Cam H had been standing firm against a changing tide in the world of psychological treatment for children with gender dysphoria. They believe that in many cases it was preferable to first help children feel comfortable in their own bodies, as they often put it. And so you see, this place that would take in trans kids and then try to get them to be cis was called conversion therapy, because it was. Alright, now I need you to think back to that second paragraph I read of the thing he posted to Twitter in regards to a different article he wrote. If you need to go back, it was like 42 minutes in. But keep that in mind when I read you this next part. In defending their approach, Zucker and his colleagues point frequently to the small but consistent body of research suggesting that something like 3/4 of children with gender dysphoria will desist. They'll eventually come to feel comfortable with their natal gender. You see why I made a point of pointing out that he wrote a whole paragraph about how this desist number, regardless, should not be used to try and force trans kids to act more cis. He wrote that after he already wrote a whole article going to defend someone who is pretty much operating conversion therapy, with their justification being, oh, a large number of trans kids turn out cis anyways. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Alright, so this Jesse guy wrote a whole defense for a guy running conversion therapy. Anna doesn't think he's transphobic. There are countless posts you can read by trans women about their awful interactions they've had with him, but Anna thinks he's not transphobic, so... Oh, and to top it all off...
It's going to be Jesse Singal, of all people. He's been fucking referenced to pass anti-trans legislation before.
To talk about this Anna Kasparian thing, she has been completely losing it online, going full TERF.
Oh my god, so I went to go get other tweets from TERFs to make kind of like a TERF scale, with Anna being the starting point, and you work your way up to be like a JK Rowling, and then so on and so forth. And this is unbelievable. This was the third tweet I found when looking for these. And I have a clip I have to include because I've been sitting on it since March. I saved it before any of this went down to be part of just a broader video about transphobia in general. And oh boy, it's one hell of a clip. Fucking let's go.
Daily Wire host Michael Knowles gave a speech on March 6th over at CPAC, and that one statement, that one pretty gross, disgusting endorsement of eradicating transgender people did exactly what he was hoping it would do. It helped him with his show numbers. It led to a bunch of anger, people who are rightly upset that someone would call for that kind of violence against a group of people that is incredibly powerless and discriminated against in this country. And I would suspect, we don't know for sure, that a lot of the disgusting commentary that comes from people like him is due to the fact that they get rewarded for it. Michael Knowles was rewarded for what he said.
I'm not saying that whinging about inclusive language is the same as calling for genocide, but what I am saying, they did the same thing. They had the same game plan. Say something, get attention. They just did it on different levels of transphobia. It was even the same down to their rebuttal. Their response to pushback was just semantics. Michael Knowles went, oh, I didn't say people, I said ism. And Anna just picking and choosing between the different terms she does and doesn't like. Even with the timeline, it's almost like Anna fucking got the idea from him. And finally, to be brutally honest, I personally would rather enemies that identify themselves as enemies. I'd rather that than snakes that will act like they are for the same causes while actually undermining them.
I do unironically think that Jack and Anna are some of the most harmful people spreading transphobic stuff right now, specifically because they are telling their audience of people who would otherwise be allies that the smart strategy is to throw trans people under the bus. That the smart strategy is to distance yourself from trans people at the time where trans people are most being threatened.
Your ignorance leaves a hell of a stench. The aroma lingers on generations have known.
I think it's incumbent upon you, if you are a part of the left, to be militant in support of trans activists.